Okay, so. Okay, let me open this fifth edition of Human Rights Day, organized by Research Committee 26 on Human Rights, International Political Science Association. This is a fifth session we started in 2025. This session is called Never Again is Now, the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War and founding of the United Nations. 80 years ago, the world stood among the ruins of war and the ashes of humanity. The words never again were not yet a slogan. They were a woe carved from the pain of the genocide, destruction, and the moral collapse that had consumed nations. And out of the devastation, the United Nations was born, a promise of peace, dignity, and human rights for all. Today, we mark Human Rights Day 2025. We gather not only for commemorate that war, but also confront its inefficient meaning, because never again is not a phrase of the past. It is a command of the present. Around the world, we see intolerance, wars, intolerance gaining ground through being distorted, hate speech amplifying division, and human rights defenders' silence. The shadows of the past are no longer behind us. They are among us. This year's theme, titled Never Again is Now, reminds us that remembrance without action is hollow. Protecting human rights today means guarding the truth, defending democratic values, and upholding the dignity of every person, regardless of race, belief, gender, or nation. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was not written as a race in 1948. It is a living document calling on each generation to renew its courage. Let us, therefore, reaffirm that promise of 80 years ago that the human family must never again divide itself by hatred or indifference. Let us make never again real for education, justice, and compassion, because the test of our time is not how strongly we remember, but how bravely we respond for many challenges. I'm honored because our first speaker, we have during this session many excellent speakers, but the first speaker, keynote speaker, will be Professor Carlos Ramon Fernandez Liesa from Carlos University in Madrid. Professor Liesa has been Professor of Public International Law and International Relations at Carlos III University in Madrid since 2005, where he has headed the Globalization, Cooperation and Integration Process Reach Group since 2004. He is currently the representative of Carlos III University in Madrid at the Civil War Center. He is the editor of the Ibero-American Electronic Journal, the Tiempo de Paz Journal, at the master's degree in Solidarity and Social Inclusion. He is a full member of Aragonese Academy of Jurisprudence and Legislation, a corresponding member of the Royal Academy of Jurisprudence and Legislation, and vice president of the International Law section. He is a member of the United Nations Human Rights Committee and the expert of the Moscow Community of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe for the period 2022-2028. He was president of IEEE, Trans-European Network Working Group, vice president of Petersberg Foundation for the Study of Cooperation of Human Rights, member of the Ethics Committee of the Spanish Olympic Committee. He was Secretary General and Vice Chancellor of the Carlos III University in Madrid, Director of the Francesco de Victoria Institute of International Law and European Studies, Director of the Department of International Law, Ecclesiastical Law and Philosophy of Law, and Director of Fernando de los Law Student Residence. He has been a visiting professor at the Institute of Sorbonne University in Paris, University of Notre Dame, United States, at the University of Oxford in 2024. among many other institutions in Mexico, Colombia, Cuba, Argentina, Brazil, and many other places. Author of 8 monographs and more than 150 scientific articles. He has supervised 20 doctoral theses and coordinated 25 collective books. Under the direction of Professor Giorgio Pesce-Verba, he co-edited an international law section of the Dickinson Encyclopedia of Human Rights. He's a member of the editorial board and numerous scientific journals, including the Revista Impresos Derechos Humanos, the Spanish Yearbook of International Law, and Derechos y Libertades, among others. He has also edited several book series. He has directed multiple research projects. Professor, I'm sorry if I omitted something, because the list of your achievement is, well, amazing. However, once again, thank you very much for your decision to be a part of this meeting, and we are waiting for your speech. The floor is yours, Professor.
Thank you very much for your introduction, for the invitation to this academic act, and thank you too to Professor Oscar Pérez de la Fuente, my colleagues at the University Carlos III, and both good friends. Good morning. It is an honor for me to participate in an IPSA International Political Science Association event led by the University of Poznan, where I went many years ago. A great city and a great university. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. In this brief speech, I am going to talk about the future of human rights. It is a broad and vague topic, but I believe it can allow us to reflect on where we are and where we are going. Human rights are a product of history, power, and ideas. As a historical product, as Bobbio said, human rights arise where they can, when they can, and how they can. The history of human rights is full of martyrs, struggles, and hopes. We often see only the good in the past and forget the bad. When we analyze the 20th century, we do not see that there have been 2 world wars with countless deaths, that there have been genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The struggle for human rights is full of light and shadow, greatness and sadness. We are still on the path at that difficult time. The war in Ukraine as a result of Russian aggression, the crimes in Gaza, the way migration is being dealt with, the setback to rights in place such as Afghanistan, the situation of poverty, inequality, the existence of failed and democratic states that violate human rights are all negative factors. Added to this is the attitude of leaders such as President Trump, who is opposed to the United Nations and climate change. We are witnessing a resurgence of principles such as sovereignty, non-intervention, and immunity. Recently, in July 2025, the French Court of Cassation ruled that El-Assad has immunity as a former head of state. An emerging power such as China is not a member of the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Furthermore, the strength of interest over values has been reborn, as shown by the fact that universal jurisdiction is in decline, at least in Spain. Addressing the challenges of human rights implies, first and foremost, we eat from the perspective of values, the values that have been defended since the Enlightenment are dignity, upon which the edifice of human rights is built, as well as the values of freedom, equality, justice, and solidarity. These values are sometimes challenged without being replaced by others. we must continue to fight for these values. Another issue is that there are new values and new approaches that allow for a renewal of the meaning of those values. That's in relation to dignity. The anthropocentric foundation of human rights is complemented by the protection of nature. This does not mean equating human beings with living beings and nature. Recently, international jurisprudence has been making progress in connecting ecology and human rights to areas of international law that have been traditionally separate. This is the case with the International Court of Justice in its July advisory opinion on climate change and international law, the American Court of Human Rights in a ruling a few months earlier, and the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea in 2024. The jurisprudence of the European Court of Human Rights and the Human Rights Committee is also in this kind. This, together with various resolutions of the United Nations Assembly and the Council, has made it possible to consider the existence of the right to a healthy, clean, and sustainable environment, which represent a renewal of the meaning of values in a new, prudent, and wise direction of the law. Secondly, it will also be necessary to renew the consensus on human rights. Human rights are a common language of humanity. Their historical origin lies in Western and Christian culture and civilization, without universalization became global. But today the West is in decline. The memory of past imperialism weighed heavily. First, the Spanish and Portuguese Empire, then the French, Dutch, and British, and finally the German and Belgian empires occupied the entire world, dominating America, Africa, and Asia. The colonization first and the emergence of new powers now has led to a certain anti-Westernism. Now, for human rights to remain a common language, greater intercultural and intercivilizational dialogue is important. Other regions and countries must see human rights as their own. Sometimes this can lead to some flexibility, to transforming the language with concepts from other cultures. That is, within a common standard, a universal minimum. But the acceptance of human rights requires this effort. The future of human rights also depends on institutions. First, international institutions such as international organizations where the universal system is developed. Right now, the crisis of multilateralism is seriously affecting the United Nations human rights system. It is not supported by states. The outlook is not good. In addition, the creation of a universal human rights core should be promoted. On the other hand, new international organizations for the third industrial revolution should be encouraged. It will contribute to channeling cyberspace and the digitalization of international society. On the other hand, states are an important institution for human rights. States must be strengthened, ensuring that they are solid so that they can strengthen human rights by respecting and protecting them. In addition, states must protect human rights by controlling non-state actors, in particular companies, on which progress has been made in international law last years. Thus, due diligence obligations in human rights and the environment are being developed for multinational companies. Another major challenge is the fight against impunity for serious human rights violation and the role of international courts and bodies. We see how there are crimes that go unpunished. At the end of the 20th century, the creation of an ad hoc special tribunals in Rwanda, Yugoslavia, Sierra Leone, Cambodia, and Lebanon, as well as the International Criminal Court, was a major step forward. Today, we see how this process is being halted or slowed down. It is good to return to the path of judicialization and support for criminal responsibility. This is opposed by the power that be, all of which are against international criminal justice, which is why the creation of ad hoc tribunals is being blocked by the United Nations Security Council. Human rights are not enough on their own. The law is not enough for the effective realization of human rights. People living in extreme poverty are in fact denied their rights. They do not enjoy their rights, not only economic, social, and cultural rights, but more generally all rights. The enjoyment of human rights requires as a complement the policy of states and international public policies. In this sense, we support the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. This agenda is sometimes criticized as a globalist, but I believe it is very positive for human rights. It is not an alternative, but a complement. Much of the agenda complements rights in areas such as poverty, equality, gender equality, education, decent work, and so on. We are faced with an agenda that seeks a balance between the economy, ecology, and human rights. The agenda for a sustainable world is something that is worth continuing to insist and working forwards. It will also be good for human rights to address notions of solidarity and transformation, such as humanity, future generation, world heritage, global public goods, erga omnes obligation, and jus cogens norms. International law changed because of human rights. It underwent a revolution in principle, the principle of human rights, values, human dignity, source, erga omnes jus cogens, subject, and so on. We must work to ensure that this revolution continues. We must preserve the treasure of human rights. To avoid taking steps backward, we must continue to strengthen consensus and develop rights. There are new challenges, but we must not forget the old rights linked to freedom from oppression or the basic needs of every person. I believe that although we are in a bad moment due to international conflicts and change, we must also be optimistic. We are all part of the same human race, the same species. The differences are cultural. They must be seen as a source of wealth, not of poverty. Pope Francis' encyclical Fratelli Tutti and the encyclical Laudate Deus say many things that allow us to determine the convergence between public and private ethical values. The same is true of other religions and cultures. We must seek point of union and strengthen human rights through rapprochement and dialogue between cultures, while also recognize the value of the others. As Kapuscinski said, when encountering others, we must choose dialogue over war or indifference. We are in a low cycle for human rights, but I think that as in economics, there are cycles in human rights. And I believe that, seen in historical perspective, it is foreseeable that human rights will be strengthened in the future and that the current issues of concern will be overcome. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor, for your vision of the, in fact, the future of human rights or human rights in the future. So for discussion about the history of human rights, this is fascinating, but I think that the discussion about the future of human rights is very, very important. So I don't know, I know that you have a very tension schedule, but maybe if you agree, some questions from audience, if you agree. Do you have maybe 2-3 minutes for discussion?
2 minutes. Okay, see, I have some time for discussion if some people want to.
Yeah, someone has questions to Professor. I'd like to ask you, Professor, about maybe the main spectral conflict in Ukraine and in the Gaza. Yeah, do you think that according to the contemporary legislation of human rights, it is possible to finish this conflict? And the second question is future of United Nations system. In your opinion, what is your opinion about the future? Should we need new shape of the international system of human rights, or this is enough?
In my view, the presence of the United Nations is a bad time. No, we are in a weak moment for multilateralism. We are in a crisis of international institution, international organization, by the position of some states, and especially because United States is not supporting multilateralism, no, and that is very bad for human universal system, no. The universal system of human rights of the United Nations is a weak system, but now is in a poor situation from the point of view of economy, but furthermore is in a bad moment from the point of view of the support of even other countries, not only United States, maybe in general, we are in a bad moment. But I think that there are cycles, no? I hope that in Spain we said, no hay mal que 100 años dure, no? In Spain, we have a phrase that the bad things have short term, no? My hope is that in the 2, 3, 4 years we have a new moment, no? But we need that European countries and Latin American countries, African countries, and Asiatic countries to make a network for supporting human rights, to dialogue and to improve the situation is a collective question, no? It's important the politics and diplomacy of human rights at this moment, no? And not follow only a risk consensus in relation to conflicts or to weapons, no? I think that we have to build an international society based on values, not only on problems, no? Now, in Poland, where you live, or in the north of Europe, the problem is and in all of Europe and in the world, is the war with Russia, no? But we have to try over this situation and to stop the war with justice is difficult. And to try to build a war based on values, not only on weapons, no? And for that, the culture of peace and the culture of human rights, I think, is the best one. We need dialogue. We need a lot of things, no? It's a bad moment, but we have these challenges is the most important now, no? And I hope in the future of international multilateralism, no, as the only solution for human problems, no, climate change, human rights, peace, and conflict resolution in general. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Once again, thank you to be here with us, and I hope for cooperation in the future. Yeah, thank you very much once again.
Thank you. Bye. Goodbye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, if I may, because Professor Cassius Chai requested me, because he will have the hearing in the court, if it is possible, we give floor Professor Cassius Chai, and then we will ask Professor Andrew Jupta, yeah, for speech and presentation. So, Cassius, can you hear me? Can you see us?
Yes.
Okay, but unfortunately, okay. So, as I guess you are in Brazil, and there is what time now?
Right now is 10:26 in the morning.
Let me introduce very, very shortly, because the list of achievement of Professor Cassius is very, very long, but I know that you have some duties very soon. Professor Cassius Chai is a full professor of law and geopolitics at the Federal University of Maranhão in Brazil, and permanent professor at the Faculty of Law on Victoria in Brazil. He is also a very brave man, because he is a public prosecutor in Brazil. I guess that in everywhere to serve such a position could be a very risky job, but especially in Brazil. Maybe I'm so very right, but okay. So Professor Cassius Chai is the author of many papers, books, etc. But also he is a member of RC26 board. I'm very happy, because this is the second period, and I hope that based on this level we can cooperate on many fields. Okay, Cassius, the floor is yours. Okay.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Many thanks, Professor. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, we can hear you. We can see you even, but we can see your presentation. Could you switch on? Could you share your presentation?
Yes. Right now. I think it's okay. Is that working?
Sorry, you need to see the chat. Okay. Yes. Now.
Yeah, okay. We can see. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My dear friend and vice chair, former chair of RC26, JJ, many thanks again for your generosity. My dear colleagues, Oscar, Andrew, Matthew, Alex, and it's very nice to hear with you. So briefly, between promise and practices, I think that all of us, we are much aligned with what just Professor Carlos Ramon Fernandez Liesa shared with us. So I'd like to approach this presentation between promise and practice, enforcing human rights in an unequal world. Imagine reading the conclusion of a great novel. one that promises justice, peace, and dignity for all its characters. Yet as you turn the final page, you realize the ending was written only for some. The others remain trapped in earlier chapters, replaying the same conflicts, suffering the same indignities. This is the paradox facing the United Nations. 80 years ago, in 1945, nations gathered to establish an institution dedicated to, quote, saving succeeding generations from the scourge of war and protecting human rights universally. Nonetheless, today, that promise remains largely unfulfilled for the global South. Nations and people systematically marginalized from the institution's decision-making processes. Our task today is not to blame, but to understand how did this happen? What mechanism perpetuate inequality? And most importantly, what concrete steps can we take to transform this broken promise into lived reality? So the paradox I would approach is that UN Charter proclaims all nations are equal. Article 1st declares the organization's purpose is to promote, quote, respect for the principle of equal rights of nations large and small. Yet this formal equality coexists with stark hierarchy. So we have formal equality, structural hierarchy. Consider a simple fact. 5 nations, United States, Russia, China, France, and United Kingdom, hold veto power in the Security Council. Any of them can block action on global crises affecting billions of peoples. This is not a bug in the system. It was designed this way in back 1945, when these were the victorious powers of the World Second War. What us, scholars, students, citizens, what scholars call temporal legal frameworks describes precisely this phenomenon. Systems that appear equal on paper while implementing deeply unequal distributions of power and voice. The UN uses the language of universalism while operating through colonial hierarchies, undoubtedly inherited from the 19th century. Let me illustrate with concrete outcomes. The United Nations Security Council has passed multiple resolutions condemning Russian military actions in Ukraine. Nonetheless, between 1972 and 2025, this current year, the same council has failed to enforce protections for Palestinians over 40 US vetoes preventing actions. Both situations involve sovereignty violations and civilian casualties. Yet, one receives urgent institutional response, and the other faces systematic procedural silence. This is not accidental inconsistency. It is a structural design. So how inequality works? 3 mechanisms maintain this hierarchy: financial dominance, weighted voting, and procedural control, knowledge hierarchies. Practically, the United States contributes roughly with the 22% of UN's regular budget. This transforms financial contribution into agenda-setting power. When money talks, all the other has to listen. Is that right? Is that legitimate? Southern nations providing equality, important military and personnel contributions, have minimal say in institutional priorities. When we approach the perspective of weighted voting and control in procedures, institutions like the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, voting power is explicitly weighted by economic contribution. A small wealth nation has more votes than a large poor ones. This institutionalizes what colonizers learned centuries ago. If you control the rules, you control the outcomes. The system perpetuates what we might call democracy of risks, quote, where those with the least institutional voice bear the greatest consequences. Thirdly, knowledge hierarchies. The United Nations prioritizes Western legal doctrines, economic theories, and development models of universal truth. When Southern nations propose alternatives grounded in their own histories and values, these are dismissed as merely, quote, local or particularistic. This is epistemic colonialism. The colonization of thought itself may be the most insidious form of control because it makes people internalize their own subordination. So consider climate finance as a real-world case. The Green Climate Fund was established to help Global South nations adapt to climate change. Nonetheless, most of these funds come as loans, not grants. Countries already burdened by historical debt and exploitation now incur more debt for addressing problems they didn't create. Meanwhile, northern nations that industrialized through carbon emissions face no such requirements. For example, the Caribbean island nations of Dominica sought climate resilience support. What it received was an externally designed development plan imposed as low in conditionality. Rather than expanding local agents, this framework subordinated decision-making to foreign bureaucrats and donor priorities. Real outcomes and case studies. We have approached the Ukraine and Palestine perspective. We have learned, all of us together, the COVID-19 pandemic case regarding structural violence. My dear friends, Oscar and JJ, they have organized a very spectacular book just launched a year ago. So all of us, we have persuaded initiatives discussing how the inequalities that all of us been through during the pandemic context. Yet we could also approach the perspective of development independence. The Sustainable Development Goals proclaimed the noble objectives. Professor Carlos Fernandez, he has just shared with us some very important concerns. The objectives to end poverty, ensure education, protecting the environment. Yet, southern nations pursuing these goals often face a conditionality imposing foreign priorities. Infrastructure projects get approved only if they benefit northern corporations. Agricultural policies get dictated by donor nations, not democratic choice. Health systems get privatized to satisfy creditors rather than serving populations. Brazil's Northeast region, for example, provides a stark perspective of case analysis. Despite having sufficient resources and knowledge, development initiatives face external constraints. The pattern repeats globally. Institutional arrangements ensure southern nations cannot actually control their own destinies. But we have to look forward, look to the future for all of us, alternative models and hope. This is not a story of inevitable doom. The Global South has developed alternative institutions demonstrate the different possibilities. As Professor Fernandez, and I quote his words, we have to shift to multipolar perspective. For example, India's leadership. India has led the G77 nations, representing 135 countries, demanding Security Council reform. Unlike previous requests for seat at the table, India proposes a structural transformation, meaning eliminating veto powers or requiring regional consensus for their use. India's constitutional jurisprudence recognizing water rights, environmental protection, and social rights provides models for international law moving beyond narrow civil political frameworks towards substantive justice. Brazil's BRICS Bank, rather than reform the World Bank, Brazil's, together with other members of the BRICS initiative, helped create the BRICS New Development Bank, with fundamentally different principles and functionality. All founding members have equal voting power. There is no veto system. Leadership rotates. Loans do not impose structural adjustment conditions. Countries are free to use funds according to their own priorities. The bank has mobilized trillions in infrastructure investment without the conditionality that historically subordinated the southern development to northern interests. And South Africa's constitutional innovation is a very good example that we can learn from. Post-apartheid, South Africa created a constitutional framework recognizing social and economic rights as enforceable legal entitlements. In the Groot-Boom case, the Constitutional Court ordered the government to provide housing for homeless communities. We have many and interesting examples that we can learn from. So, financial mechanism, participatory democracy, knowledge pluralism. Now, universal literature and human justice. The great novels teach us something essential about human dignity. It's not earned through power or wealth. It belongs to all simply because we are all humans. If Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment novel, the protagonist learns that justice cannot be subordinated to utility. Even benefiting society does not justify injustice to individuals. The United Nations utilitarian calculations, tolerating Palestinian suffering to maintain security and stability, accepting vaccine and hoarding to protect pharmaceutical profits, this all violates what we have called fundamental principles. Garcia Marquez has taught us in 100 Years of Solitude. Communities trapped in repetitive cycles of violence must break patterns to find peace. The Global South similarly must break cycles of institutional subordination through institutional innovation. The promise of United Nations is not merely diplomatic, it's moral. It declares that every human being deserves protection, voice, and dignity. Enforcing human rights means taking part, declaration seriously, restructure institutions so that protection and voice do not depend on geographical accident or geographical alignment. Now, closing my remarks, for which I'm very honored, dear JJ and colleagues and audience, from promise to practice. The transformation from broken promise to enforceable reality requires neither miraculous revelation nor perfect consensus. It requires commitment from those harmed to demand justice, from those benefiting to recognize that genuine peace requires genuine equality, and for all of us to reimagine what global governance could become. This is not naive utopianism. History shows that rights are never granted voluntarily by the powerful. They are won through sustained struggle and mobilization. The civil rights movement did not transform American law through the polite requests. Labor movements did not win weekends through diplomatic appeals. Decolonization did not occur through northern consent. History also shows that change is possible. India, Brazil, South Africa demonstrate that global South actors can build alternative institutions while simultaneously reform existing ones. Indigenous movements, women's network, youth climate activists show that affected communities are already participating in governance, creating facts on the ground that institutions must eventually acknowledge. Our role, whether as academic, student, lawyer, prosecutors, judges, engaged citizens, scholars, is to be part of this transformation. This means understanding how power operates through seemingly neutral institutions, supporting alternative models that distribute power equitably, demanding your own government to support institutional reform, to strengthen participatory democracy within communities, organizations, and movements all of us we inhabit, and finally hold institutions accountable for their stated principles. If the United Nations promised to protect human rights universally, 8 decades later, that promise remains conditional, selective, unequally enforced. Making it real requires no new institutions, though new institutions help. It requires something older and more powerful. It requires for all and each of us commitment to the radical proposition that all humans deserve dignity and justice, and willingness to restructure our world to honor that commitment. That is both the challenge and the hope for this moment. Thank you very much for your generosity, JJ, and colleagues to allow me to break the protocol and to get the floor earlier. Many thanks, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year for each and every one of us. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much for, as usually, fascinating presentation and speech. Any questions from audience? Maybe at the beginning, my question, because it's thank you very much for your critical analysis of United Nations system and human rights system, global human rights system, and even your proposals. But do you believe that in contemporary world it is possible to make United Nations system more democratic and more active, and so do you believe that such vision it is possible or not? What is your opinion?
Yes, I do believe that back in 1945, all of us, we were represented by our ancestors. And why not nowadays that we are here in the world at this present moment, we can reshape, we can do better than has been done. But of course, we have to be at the same page in terms of respecting human dignity, despite the ethical origins. And this is a very key problem, because we still are nurturing the prejudice and the inequality, not to recognize that each of us, we are different from each other. And that is where the equality principle should be taken seriously as the key point. We are equal because all of us, we are different. But right now, political choices try to eliminate the difference and the different. And I think that we should keep our hope. And of course, the United Nations has yet too much to contribute effectively, but now to make possible for all of us to achieve the dreamed and the promise of equality. I think, yes, JJ.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for participation, attending in this panel. And I hope that after this meeting, we will be able to publish the book. So, because as I can see, the topic of each presenters is very, very attractive, and maybe it will be good to publish these papers. Okay, please remember about this. Thank you very much, Cassius. Thank you very much. And now time for woman voice. Dr. Andrew Gupta is our new chair-elect. She is also the Associate Dean and Head of the Department of Liberal Studies in Practical Science and GERCRS University in Jaipur, Rajasthan, India. Okay, Andrew, can you hear me? Can you see me? Can you?
Yes,
okay, excellent. Oh, excellent, excellent. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, JJ, and my dear friends of RC26 Human Rights Committee, and I'm really grateful to JJ and my other colleagues for giving me a chance to speak in this webinar. And the theme of today is, yes, JJ?
Because if I may ask next speaker, it will be our chair of RC26, Alexander Pires, because I can see that Alex is with us, yeah, and maybe
yes.
Alex will be
hello,
the next
Alex,
speaker.
and so today's theme is, I think, very interesting. Never again is now. So allow me to begin with the old moral promise that sits like a stone in the conscience of our century, the promise of never again. This phrase belonged to a time when humanity thought that history could reach closure. We believed that war ended on particular dates. The peace was something you could sign on paper, and the justice came after the courtroom verdict. There was there was a certain old world dignity in that belief. Yet, if we look around today, we find ourselves living in a very different kind of time. Conflicts no longer conclude, they smolder. They move from battlefield to browser, window, from land to cloud servers, from borders to biometric databases. We live inside what feels like a perpetual present, a long twilight of low intensity conflict, of permanent emergency, and endless extraction of our data, our images, our behavior. So the title of my lecture, Never Again in a Perpetual Present, Re-Engineering Human Rights for Algorithmic Wars and Automated Atrocities. It is not a poetic exaggeration. It is in fact a warning. It asks a sharp and slightly uncomfortable questions. Can human rights system designed for a state, armies, and industrial atrocities survive in the age of neural networks, autonomous weapons, and platformized memory? So my argument is very simple. It's perhaps most dangerously simple. If we want never again to mean anything in the 21st century, we must move from human rights built around events, move towards human rights built into infrastructure. We must shift from responsibility for individual act to responsibility for social technical systems. We must move from punishing after atrocity to preventing the machinery that makes atrocity possible in the first place. In other words, we must acknowledge that future battlefield is prepared in the laboratories of software engineers, not only in the barracks of soldiers, and therefore the moral shields of a civilization must also be prepared there. You know, if we talk about the post 1945 assumptions, after 1945, if imperfectly, it tried to build a proactive, protective structure for human dignity. We built three grand pillars. First was the Nuremberg idea of individual criminal responsibility, which insisted that atrocity was not simply the crime of a nation, but the moral failure of identifiable persons. Second, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which spoke with calm voice and said that every human being simply by existing has right which no ruler may deny. And third, the Genocide Convention and later instruments which imagined atrocity as a terrible rupture, an abnormal storm that breaks the ordinary peace of society. But these noble inventions rested on certain quiet assumptions. They assumed that violence was, it is episodic, that war began and ended, that the perpetrators were states, that commands traveled down through neat chains of command, and that evidence was made of document and physical proof, not endlessly changing streams of data. All of this made perfect sense in the world of industrial massacre and paper archives. But today, these assumptions appear as antique as steam engines in the Silicon laboratory. Why there is a mismatch with our current reality? Today's conflicts behave very differently. They are persistent drones, cyber operations, hybrid campaigns. They are deterritorialized. You may collect data in one continent, process it in a second, and then kill in the third. And they are socio-technical, built by corporations, deployed by states, fine-tuned by algorithms and fed by the data of millions of ordinary people who never consented and often never suspected. So never again was designed to respond to gas chambers and death marches, terrible events that announce themselves to the world. But what does never again mean? When atrocity emerges quietly from a biased data set, a flawed optimization function, or a misspecified AI model, and no human ever clearly intended, if we try, if we stay loyal to old methods simply because they are familiar, we run the quiet risk of that never again becoming a museum exhibit rather than a living commitment. Our grandchildren will hear the words but not feel their meaning. So dear friends, when we sometimes say that algorithmic war as if it is a dramatic metaphor, but let us be very precise. These are not slogans. They are not described by, they are described by a genuine transformation by the machinery of conflict. Modern wars are not like, they are now not they are now layered like digital architectures. They operate through sensing, deciding, and acting, and then at each layer artificial intelligence enters quietly, doing moral work without moral understanding. I have identified the 3 layers of algorithmic war. Let us begin with the most innocent sounding task: to sense the battlefield. Modern militaries gather mountains of data, satellite imaging, mobile phones, patterns, social media traces, biometric information. Machine learning systems are trained to work like digital hunters, finding patterns faster than any human eye. So, but the danger is very subtle. These systems may use proxy indicators, your language, your location, even when you type your mobile devices. So to decide that you belong to a risk group, a community by accident of geography or dialect may be labeled suspicious. One hardly needs to be reminded that human history already knows that happens when entire communities are marked as suspicious. Only now it occurs not through ideology alone, but through predictive analysis. So, the second layer is much more serious. AI no longer, it merely observes, it assists in choosing whom to target, where to strike, when to attack. In some systems, it recommends course of action. In others, it silently arranges priorities. Human commanders may still sit in the control room, but often they are like old station masters after the arrival of automated railways, important in theory but increasingly ornamental. So decisions come so quickly that humans can only confirm, not comprehend. We are drifting towards a strange moral horizon where responsibility remains human, but decision making becomes machine shaped. So finally, there's a layer of action. Autonomous drones and semi-autonomous weapons can select and engage targets without direct human steering. A conflict may unfold while humans sleep. Even more troubling, the cyber warfare behaves like a chain reaction. A small automated attack may multiply itself, replicating through systems faster than political leaders can even believe. Violence becomes something that spreads like digital fire. And as every historian knows, fire is one of the oldest metaphors for uncontrolled human destruction. What is exactly an automated atrocity? Now let us speak very plainly. An automated atrocity is just not it is not just an old crime with shiny buttons. It has a new kind of harm. The first feature is distributed agency. No single person sit like an old tyrant commanding destruction. Instead, many hands, many keyboards, many code modules, they contribute small pieces, none of which look like murderous on their own. The harm appears like an emergent storm from systems incentives, engineering choices, and machine activity. Second, we have opaque causation. To understand why one building was destroyed, we may need to access the proprietary software, training data, and corporate algorithms. These are often locked away by commercial secrecy or national security. In such a world, truth itself becomes classified. Third automated atrocity is reproducible. Once a harm pattern enters the algorithm, it may travel across continents, quietly replicated under different flags and jurisdiction. Hitler needed long columns of soldiers. An algorithm needs only a database and a server farm. Fourth is a temporal displacement. The dangerous model choice may not be taken on the battlefield at all. It may be taken years. It may be taken years earlier by someone configuring an error tolerance in a laboratory, perhaps with no political intention at all. We face, therefore, something that international law never prepared for: crimes that never begin without criminal intention. Our inherited categories, intent, knowledge, recklessness, were developed for human minds. They imagined commanders with faces and names, but algorithmic harm often has no face. It is born from architecture, from optimization, from decision distributed over years. So we are left with a very deeply troubling question. Can we speak of atrocity when no one intended atrocity, yet atrocity results? So history teaches us that evil is something which is very loud, it is ideological, it is cruel, but 21st century may show us another kind of evil, quiet, statistical, and automated. No out of hatred, not out of hatred, but out of optimization. And that, colleagues, is why we must rethink the very foundation of never again. My friends, whenever great harm appears in human affairs, our instinct is to look for somebody, some authority, some commander, some villain to hold accountable. This instinct comes from our deep moral memory. Every civilization has known the desire to name the wrongdoer and demand moral answer. But the structure of modern algorithmic war has quietly overgrown our old maps of responsibility. The chain of harm is no longer a line, it is a network. Classical international criminal law imagines a very difficult, very dignified and almost classical sequence. An order is given, an act happens, a harm results, a person is responsible. This was logical in the age of generals, armies, but not now. In today's world, where there is an algorithmic war, the picture resembles a long network diagram where many actors touch the system in different moments. A research laboratory designed a model claiming it is a dual use, perhaps for humanitarian mapping or border management. A defense contractor integrates it into a targeting platform. A state deploys it during ambiguous security operations. Civilian platforms supply the data of millions of users without their knowledge or consent. Meanwhile, the autonomy may be increased or decreased according to the tactical convenience. At each node, the actor sincerely believes that they are not the true decision maker. Everyone is a little responsible, but not responsible enough to cross the threshold of criminal guilt. The result is what scholars call a responsibility gap. I would say, however, the problem is not a gap, but an over dispersion of responsibility. We have many small fragments of guilt which never assemble themselves into a human face. In old tragedies, the murderer could at least be named. In our new tragedies, responsibility, they dissolve into the cloud. So our legal doctrine focus on deployment because traditionally weapons were morally neutral until used, but now dangerous moral choice is made at the at a design stage. What data trains the model, which error rates are accepted, which biases are tolerated. So modern corporations holds the key to data infrastructures and computing powers. Without them, no state cannot wage algorithmic war. They are not secondary actors, they are co-producers. So yet the human rights law still treats them like a polite guest at the dinner table, importantly, but not truly accountable. So a skeptic may say, but these are private actors, but the destruction they enable is very public. The black box of a machine learning combined with national security secrecy and corporate trade protection creates a new kind of impunity. If victims cannot see how decisions were made, they cannot prove wrongdoing. Accountability becomes a ritual rather than a remedy. We risk creating a world where atrocity hides behind the mathematics and classification labels. Not because humans are wicked, but because our transparency rules belong to a proper age while violence has moved to silicon. So some colleagues propose that we gently stretch our existing doctrines. They suggest that broadening command responsibility or complexity or applying due diligence to automated system. I support these efforts, but I fear that they are insufficient. For the issue is not missing paragraph or two. The issue is that the metaphors of our law belong to 20th century. Our law imagines commanders, reality gives us design and data engineers. Our law imagines discrete actions, reality gives us continuous optimization. Our law imagines ex post punishments, reality requires an ex ante design control. If we treat algorithmic war as simple ordinary war with fancier machines, then never again will quietly become never clarity attributable. And when nobody can be blamed, then nobody will be stopped. This is the future unworthy of our moral heritage. Having traveled through these unsettling landscapes of algorithmic war, we must not remain only in the valley of critique. If the human rights ignition is to remain alive, we must also seek higher ground. So let me offer humbly few directions towards what I can tell a fourth generation human rights architecture, one prepared not for yesterday's wars, but for tomorrow's automated conflicts. The four clusters of new or retooled rights. The first is the infrastructural rights. The traditional human rights focus on events, arrest, torture, bombing, but algorithmic war atrocity often begins unstreamed in data collection and system design. Thus, human rights must reach upstream as well. Communities should have the right to contest the use of their personal data in a system of surveillance and targeting. They should be able to say, we refuse to become raw material for your algorithmic battlefield. The second is the algorithmic audit and explanation rights. Where systems affect life and liberty, we need something far deeper than polite transparency reports. There must be strong rights to independent audit by trusted external bodies, experts who can look inside the models, inspect the data, and measure bias. Equally, people must receive meaningful explanations, not vague notices, just like a system flashed suspicion, but clear reasons answering why a community, a family, or a person becomes a target. And when there's a harm occurs, remedy must include the power to stop the alternate system, not only to pay compensation after the damage has been done. The third is the right to meaningful human control. The phrase sounds simple, but it hides a very serious question. Why does human control matter most? At what moment must a human conscious be awake and capable of refusal? Meaningful control should be exercised not at the ceremonial moment of activating a system, but precisely at the moral moment of deciding whether to strike a human target. If that decision is made by algorithm and the human merely confirms, then we have replaced command responsibility with mere button responsibility. Some form of delegation to machines should be declared presumptively unlawful, and some should be forbidden outright. We do not permit certain weapons because they violate human dignity, and the same must apply to certain configurations of autonomy. And finally, the collective rights against the automated atrocity risk. The final cluster recognizes that many algorithmic harms are systematic. Therefore, entire population should have the right to be consulted when autonomous systems are deployed near them. They should not be passive subject of technological experiments. Regional communities should be able to challenge deployments even before harm occurs. The traditional requirements to wait for a violation is tragically an old fashion in a world where prevention must operate at the level of design and infrastructure. Let me suggest two doctrinal innovations, bold, perhaps necessary. System level crimes. We must recognize that certain social systems, technical systems themselves constitute a crime when they predictably generate widespread violation, not one bombing, but the architecture that guarantees many bombing. And secondly, the architectural command responsibility. Responsibility should be extended to those who design the environment, decision environment, the error tolerances, the autonomy levels, the incentives long before the deployment. If a system is built such that unlawful outcomes are foreseeable, then it is its architecture share the responsibility too. This shifts our gaze from final violent act to the structural contributions that made violence inevitable. So if I may borrow a gentle metaphor, genocide has been treated as terrible fire, but in algorithmic war, the spark may lie in the electrical wiring installed years before the fire ever burns. Our legal imagination must therefore inspect the wiring, not the ashes. And lastly, avoiding the digital utopianism and digital fatalism. We need a balanced approach that sets real rules to understand the real risk without panic and without blind optimism. The digital utopianism tells us that technology will solve everything if only we write more ethical guidelines and hire more AI ethicists. All shall be well. But without hard law and democratic power, ethical principles becomes public relations documents praised in corporate reports and quietly ignored in the actual deployment. So a wise path lies somewhere between extremes. We must dare to say that some technological configurations are simply incomplete with human dignity, just as certain chemical and biological weapons are forbidden. So to some forms of lethal autonomy, mass biometric surveillance, and predictive analytics targeting entire population must be declared unacceptable in a civilized world. Now, decentering Europe while defending universality. Our distinguished gathering speaks from many traditions, yet we may admit that human rights imagination has often leaned on European memory, especially the horrors of the mid-20th century. But today, the communities most exposed to algorithmic warfare are in the global south, in population long governed under emergency, under occupation, under technological surveillance. The fourth generation architecture must therefore listen to those voices not as victims but as knowledge holders. These societies have lived with continuous crisis and technological monitoring long before the drones filled our skies. Their experience must shape governance of data, infrastructure, and global standards, not as a consolations after the fact, but as equal co-authors of the future. So colleagues, allow me to return to the quiet but powerful phrase that has guided so many generations: never again. Today, it risks becoming a ceremonial utterance spoken at memorials, while new forms of harm are engineered in research laboratories and defense ministries. So if it is to maintain its moral gravity, three transformations are necessary. First, we must move from event-based thinking to infrastructure-based protection. Second, from individual responsibility to systematic and architectural responsibility. Third, from punishing after the harm to shaping technology before the harm becomes impossible. Our task in this world, Congress, and in the councils that follow is not merely to sprinkle a few fashionable AI terms onto our classical doctrines. It is to ask deep questions about which technologies and which business models belong in a world that claims to honor human dignity. We can redesign the architecture of human rights for the age of neural networks and autonomous weapons. Then perhaps, just perhaps, our grandchildren will not inherit our fears. They will inherit our courage, and then with clear conscience and steady voice, they may speak those old words again, not as nostalgia, but as a promise, never again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your speech. Any questions from audience to Andrew? So if I may, a very short question. Andrew, thank you very much for your vision of human rights and idea of never again from the digital point of view. Of course, we can find many others such threat for human rights of like artificial intelligence, etc., etc. Do you, in your opinion, do you believe or that we need a new kind of digital universal declaration on human rights, or the new declaration of human rights in digital era? Of course, with the many such topics which you mentioned.
Yes, JJ, I think there is a need to revise the human rights once again for the 20th century, not for ourselves, but for the future generation as well. Because I think this is a challenge. I must not speak, but you can see that how digital transformation is going on, how in fact this has become a threat to not only to a country but globally. It has become a very serious challenge for all the governments. So I think there is a need, especially to revise the human rights if we are living in a digital era. And I think we all should we all should propose, all the countries must propose for this change, that there has to be a revision in the human rights, because ultimately it is the human dignity, ultimately it is the humanity which is affected by all these developments, the use of AI and various other challenges which we are facing because of the AI and other digital technologies. Thank you. I think.
Thank you very much. I agree with you, but I'm rather skeptical on this field, because in contemporary world, so I don't believe that such new attempts it is possible. However, thank you very much. And this is a time for our chair, Professor Alexander Pires from the Autonomous University of Lisbon, also authors of many books, co-editor, etc. So, Alex, thank you very much for joining the session. Your topic is constitutionalism in crisis, democratic deficit and contemporary challenges to human rights. And if I may, ask next speaker, my vice dean, Professor Anna Potyrała from Adam Mickiewicz University, it will be great. And next speaker, Oscar Perez La Fuente, professor from the Carol III University in Madrid, and co-organizer of the session. Yeah. However, now, Alex, the floor is yours. Okay. So.
Okay, thank you very much. I need your help only for sharing my presentation. I'm a little...
Yes, you need to see at the bottom on the right, you see the chat, you see the participants, and you see an arrow. Click the arrow, share content, and then share file, and then you should upload the file, and then share the file. Can you see?
The right.
On the right of the bottom, the arrow, share content.
Okay, no problem. I will continue without the share. So, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You can. Yeah.
So.
Can see. Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, greetings from Lisbon. I'm grateful for the honorable invitation to participate in this important event, which is already considered a milestone in the reflection on human rights. Thank you very much, Professor Yedras, my dear DJ. I congratulate Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznan for its initiative and organization. It is an honor for me to participate once again in a conference at this high level and traditional university. I would also like to note the honor of being able to share this working group with experts on the subject of human rights and meeting again in this scientific environment with colleagues from IPSA RC26 on human rights. So my talk today is about constitutionalism in crisis, democratic deficit, and contemporary challenges to human rights. The central question I would like to talk about is why do we face at the same time a democratic deficit and a human rights crisis? And how can constitutional theory respond? So first of all, it's important to clarify what we think about constitutionalism. Wide concept. So by constitutionalism, I mean more than a simple written constitution or a set of formal rules. Constitutionalism is the idea that political power must be limited, accountable, and exercised in a way that guarantees fundamental rights and democratic participation. In other words, it's not only a legal framework, but also a political and a moral commitment to restrain authority and to protect human dignity. In this context, for this time, I will divide my presentation in three parts. First of all, the democratic deficit, followed by the crisis of human rights, and finally, possible paths for renewed constitutionalism. So let's start with the idea of democratic deficit. By democratic deficit, I refer a gap between democratic principles and the democratic practices. It means that institutions formally exist, but citizens lack real influence, accountability is weak, and the decision-making often moves away from public control. At the supranational level, for one hand, give us important decisions, but are often made from away from citizens. So in this case, we can think about the European Union example. There is the most famous case. We have complex institutions, limited transparency, and a perception of distance between rulers and the people. For the other hand, in the national level, we also see problems. Citizens are increasingly disengaged, leading to civic apathy, populism and polarization undermine trust in institutions, and in many democracies, the system still works formally, but legitimacy is fragile. In short, democracy seems present in name, but often absent in practice. So this thing leads us to think in the crisis of human rights. the parallel to the democratic crisis. So we face the crisis of human rights integrally. First, rights are increasingly instrumentalized in political battles. Governments use rights discourse selectively to advance partisan interests, followed by there are serious implementation problems, like as even rights are formally recognized, they are not effectively realized, especially in society marked by inequality. Third, global challenges have intensified and at least at least in I think in three points, three real and accented points. The first one, migration crisis, where basic rights of refugees are often violated. Climate change, creating new categories and vulnerable populations, and wars and authoritarian regimes, where fundamental rights are directly suppressed. Together, these factors and these three last cases erode the credibility of human rights as a universal guarantees. Setting this point, we can see and analyze some examples. First of all, in the case of the United Nations. So this tension is also visible in global institutions. Looks like a little more complex in the case of the United Nations. For one hand, the United Nations has played a central role in the promotion of human rights since 1948, setting global standards through conventions and monitoring bodies. On the one hand, its structure reveals a clear democratic deficit. The Security Council, for example, concentrates power in the hands of 5 permanent members with veto rights, often paralyzing collective action. This duality illustrates the broader problem. Even institutions designed to protect universal rights can suffer from limited legitimacy and lack of accountability. Another case is the European Union, that we can see the similar tension. While the European Union has established a strong legal framework for human rights, including the Charter of Fundamental Rights, recent years have shown challenges in enforcing these standards. Some member states have undermined judicial independence, restricted press freedom, or limited civil society participation. These developments reveal that even a system designed to protect rights at a regional level can experience a human rights crisis, often linked to the democratic deficit within this institution. So we can now analyze some cases more appointed, look like in America, Africa, Asia, in restricted case. The first one that I would like to talk is about the North American. So in the United States, ongoing tensions exist between democratic ideals and political practice. Issues such as gerrymandering, voter suppression, and highlighted polarized politics reveal gaps in citizen participation and accountability. Debates around civil rights, immigration, and racial justice show the fragility of human rights protections, even in a long-standing democracy. In South Africa, countries' democratic institutions, for the other hand, in another perspective, face both political and social pressures. Weak rule of law, corruption, and threats to judicial independence undermine democratic legitimacy. Human rights crises manifest in social inequality, state violence, and struggles of indigenous and minority rights. These examples illustrate that both democratic deficit and human rights crises are present in diverse political contexts across the Americas, reinforcing the need for adaptable constitutional reforms. We can also think in experience from Asia. China, like a case in East and Southeast Asia, demonstrates a strong decentralization of power, restriction on political freedom, censorship, and widespread digital surveillance. Hong Kong has seen setback in civil rights and judicial autonomy. Other countries like Thailand and Myanmar experienced coups and limitations on democratic institutions, followed by the South Asia's case. In India, tensions arise between constitutional rights and national policy, include challenges to minority protection and rising political polarization. Countries such as Pakistan and Afghanistan show weak institutions and frequent violations of fundamental rights. These examples illustrate that democratic deficit and human rights crises are present across Asia, emphasizing the need for adaptable constitutional response. We can also think in experience from Africa, from North Africa, in countries such as Libya, Egypt, and Tunisia, following the Arab Spring, have faced difficulties in democratic transition, political instability, and restriction of civil rights. Sub-Saharan Africa, in countries like Nigeria, Sudan, and Mali, coups, internal conflicts, and fragile institutions undermine democratic legitimacy. Human rights concerns include ethnic violence, threats to press freedom, and limitation on minority rights. These examples highlight that democratic deficit and human rights crises are present across Africa, further emphasizing the global nature of these challenges. So now we need to think about the development and some answers to the central question. And we can restrict this question by another thought. In short, what role can constitutionalism play in this context? So the classical liberal model of constitutionalism is under pressure. Traditional approaches assume that constitution functions primarily as a legal framework to limit state power and protect individual rights. Yet in practice, we see that formal guarantees alone are insufficient. When institutions are weak, accountability is low, or political power is concentrated. In response, scholars and practitioners have proposed several adaptations. The first one, transformative constitutionalism, view the Constitution as tool for social and structural change, aiming to address inequalities and promote substantive rights, not just formal freedoms. The second one, multi-level constitutionalism, emphasizes the interaction between local, national, regional, and global levels of governance, recognizing that rights protection and democratic legitimacy are increasingly transnational. And the last one, intercultural and decolonial approach that challenges Eurocentric assumptions, highlighting the importance of cultural context, indigenous rights, and pluralistic legal tradition in shaping constitutional frameworks. Beyond this theoretical approach, practical strategies are also needed. We can think in some four parts. The first one, strengthening judicial independence to ensure that courts can act as real guarantors of rights, followed by promoting participatory democracy, including civil society engagement, citizen assemblies, and digital platforms for inclusive decision-making. The third, reinforce accountability mechanisms at all levels of government, from local authorities to supranational bodies like the European Union and the United Nations. And the last, encouraging constitutional dialogue between states and international organizations so that global human rights standards are effectively implemented while respecting local conditions. Ultimately, a renewed constitutionalism requires flexibility and adaptability. It must protect fundamental rights, enhance democratic participation, and provide tools to respond to political, social, and environmental crises. In short, constitutionalism transition is not just about laws on paper. It is about building institutions and practice that restore legitimacy and trust in democratic governance while safeguarding human dignity. In last words, to conclude, let us reflect on what we have discussed today. Across the globe, from the United Nations to the European Union, from the Americas to Asia and Africa, we observe a persistent democratic deficit and a widespread crisis of human rights. Formal institutions and legal guarantees exist, but in many contexts, they are insufficient to ensure citizen participation, accountability, and the protection of fundamental rights. Constitutionalism in this challenging landscape remains essential. However, it cannot be static. It must evolve to meet the demands of modern governance. It must be inclusive, adaptable, and attentive to social realities. A renewed constitutionalism should, first, protect and promote human rights substantively, not just formally. Second, strengthening mechanisms of accountability and civic engagement. Third, foster dialogue between local, national, and international acts. And the fourth, embrace cultural diversity and a plural legal transition, respecting the experience and needs of different societies. Ultimately, the text before us is to bridge the gap between constitutional ideals and political realities, ensuring that democratic institutions genuinely serve people and that human rights are protected everywhere. Only through this renewed and proactive constitutionalism can we hope to address the global democratic deficit and restore faith in the promise of human dignity, equality, and justice. Thank you very much. I look forward for a new opportunity and the dialogue and debate. Thank you.
Alex. Yeah, Alex, thank you very much for this very interesting for your presentation. From my point of view, it was very, very worthy because you gave us some comparative constitutional perspective on the sources of crisis on this field. Yeah, thank you very much. If I may, traditionally, to ask one question only. Of course, if someone from audience would like to ask us time for questions. Alex, could you explain us, because when you talk about EU, this is rather clear why we have the constitutional crisis, yeah, democratic deficit, because this is a shape of EU and idea of EU and problem with what is the idea for EU on the future. But I agree with you that we can, for example, in Poland and also in other countries, like even in the United States, we can observe constitutionalism crisis. Why it happened now? Do you think that one of the reasons of such situation, because you mentioned many features, but what I called the paradox of social media, that it's saying that we have finally the platform when everyone could share opinion freely, but in fact we can say that this is not social media, this is algorithm platform only. Yeah. So lately I read the report that majority of posts on social media are created not by human being, but for bots, yeah. So do you think that this is one of the reason of this type of crisis? Do you agree with that thesis?
Okay, thank you so much for your question. This is so complex because I think that, our problem is structural, is from the basis, from the bottom to the top. We need to read the skills. We need to rethink our principle. Is a kind of to think to back to the principles, because I think we are losing our foundation, and the new perspectives and the new society put us against the wall. So we need to give a new answer, but we don't know how to resolve or answer the most universal or basic problems. Looks like war is democracy. How we can think the new values of the Constitution. Why we need to continue to think the democracy for just one perspective. So I think we need to back to the principles, and then we can go a little more in a long distance just before. I think there is, my dear DJ.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alex. I mentioned in my last sentence that we discussed about this during the conference which you organized a week ago in Lisbon. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for a very interesting discussion. Unfortunately, someone interrupted us meeting. This is one of the reason why so democracy could be under the threat, yeah. So because such I don't know, people, boards, etc., yeah, can have an influence impact on the democratic procedures. However, thank you very much, and thank you very much for your presentation and attending in this session. Okay, thank you very much. And now time is for Professor Anna Potyrała from Adam Mickiewicz University, Vice Dean of my Faculty of Political Science. And I'm very proud because Professor Potyrała is a member of a completely new interdisciplinary research committee on human rights here on Adam Mickiewicz University. Let me introduce a few sentences the Professor Potyrała, because she is not a member of RC26 board of IPSA. Professor Potyrała is political scientist and lawyer. Professor works at our faculty in Department of International Relations. Her scientific interest comprise of international law, especially international humanitarian law, international criminal law, and international refugee regime. She is the author of numerous papers and books on international criminal tribunals, the refugee questions, and migration crisis. Professor Anna Potyrała is here in Poznań. So, Anya, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope that the connection is okay, because I was informed by the system that there are some troubles, but I hope that you can hear me. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for the invitation to this session, and it is my great honor to be part of today's discussion. And to be honest, I'm in such a good position that few previous panelists have already mentioned issues which I would like to talk about, because when previous panelists, they pointed out some problems, some challenges in human rights protection which we face today, accountability has been mentioned. So as Professor Jędrzej Skrzypczak, when he introduced me a moment ago, he said that my scientific interest is focusing on international, among other things, on international criminal law and activities of international criminal tribunals, ad hoc courts, hybrid courts, but also ICC. I would like to focus your attention on this problem. And when I look at the topic of today's, or the title of our panel, and when, for instance, I focus on analysis made by Professor Carlos Fernandez Liesa, I think that we are all aware of the fact that it's been several times since 1945 when one had to admit that never again is now. If we look at the debate which took place shortly after 1945-46, kind of a relativism between the pursuit of international peace, the pursuit of international security, and the protection of human rights on one hand, and foreign policy interests on the other became very visible, became apparent. I think that the most visible evidence was the refusal to establish a permanent international criminal court, despite the formal consent of the signatories to the 1948 Anti-Genocide Convention. This refusal to establish such a court, it was a clear evidence that of what Morgenthau said, that international politics cannot be reduced to legal rules, to legal institutions, that the international politics reflects the interest of individual states, particular interests which are aimed rather at achieving benefits than at executing some moral or ethical values. Professor Fernandez has said that human rights have been designed basing on a perspective of values, justice, solidarity. But then in the 40s and in the following decades, even if we had in mind pictures from the World War II atrocities, we knew that realism was actually the driving force for all activities taken in the international arena. And of course, a lot of international legal acts focusing on human rights protection have been adopted. However, the problem which is visible till today, these are violations. This is a very weak system of protection, a very weak control mechanisms system. So for this reason, until 1990s, the legal concept of individual accountability for international crimes, it was actually only declarative in nature. And unfortunately, it took massive human rights atrocities committed in the former Yugoslavia, committed in Rwanda, for the international community to take corrective action. And of course, I agree with Professor Gupta. She said that we may talk only about post hoc reactions. Yes, this is what international justice is about. So when decisions have been taken to establish ad hoc tribunals, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, of course that the aim was as the preamble of the UN Charter stated, to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in equal rights, in the dignity, etc., etc. But and of course, it was a positive step. The result of both tribunals' activities, they actually demonstrated the effectiveness of international justice, and not only because perpetrators have been brought to justice, but mostly because of the fact that tribunals were regarded as kind of integral components of international peace processes. They have been regarded as elements making it possible to strengthen national reconciliation, etc., etc. But of course, despite these visible effects of both tribunals' work, what was the problem? It was the frequent refusal to cooperate with both tribunals. So I think that we all remember cases when states refused to cooperate, and for instance, they opposed to the possibility of letting their own representatives to act as witnesses during trials. States also refused to transfer documents which were necessary, for instance, to prepare indictments. And of course, I think that the most famous examples, these were examples of denying to execute arrest warrants issued by ICTY or ICTR. Both tribunals were accused of violating international fundamental principles, like, for instance, Jus Cogens norms such as the sovereign equality of states or the Jus Cogens norm of non-interference in internal affairs of another states. And of course, these allegations, they stemmed firstly from the fact that both ad hoc tribunals were established not as a result of an international agreement, and only international agreements, they reflect the will of sovereign countries, because in both situations, we didn't have an international agreement, but only a resolution, only a decision taken by the UN Security Council. And it was one reason for this criticism. The second, it was the fact that both tribunals, according to their statutes, they had primacy over national jurisdiction, and it was regarded as kind of a crime against sovereignty, crime against sovereign competences of states. And of course, for that reason, when international community members started to discuss the draft of the future statute of the future permanent criminal court, it was obvious that both issues of contention must have been eliminated. So when the Rome Statute was adopted, the new court, ICC, was established, first of all, as a result of an international agreement, so the Rome Statute, but it was granted only complementary competence. So complementary jurisdiction was the answer to all those accusations focusing on violations of state sovereignty. So on one hand, we have positive examples of international community acting on behalf of human rights post hoc protection. So we have steps taken and finishing in the creation of international criminal courts. But on the other hand, we still know that, and we still witness today, a situation in which the legacy of ad hoc tribunals is threatened, and not even the legacy of ad hoc tribunals. We may also see and point out that the Nuremberg legacy is also threatened. Of course, I know all the criticism of the Nuremberg tribunal and the Nuremberg trial, but still we are aware of the fact that the Nuremberg principles adopted as a result of the court's judgment, of the military tribunal judgment, they serve as a basis for all legislative initiatives taken after 1946. And today this legacy is threatened, mostly because ICC is accused of being politicized, mostly because ICC is accused of promoting justice, which is not just, and because ICC is accused also of being responsible for some kind of a regionalization of justice. If we focus on this first element, so politicization, of course we may point out situations when critics of ICC say it is not possible to issue an indictment, to prepare an indictment and to issue an arrest warrant against heads of states. But this is this legacy of Nuremberg. No matter if you are a head of state or not, if you enjoy privileges and immunities, in case of atrocities, in case of accusations of the most grave international crimes, you may not hide behind such guarantees. Today, when we hear about indictments prepared against Vladimir Putin or against Benjamin Netanyahu, we may hear voices that it is an example of ICC being politicized. If we look at this second element or second point of critique, that this justice promoted by ICC is not just at all, we usually connect this problem with the competence of the Security Council. The Security Council has the possibility to refer a case to ICC. And of course, it's done that many times on one hand, but on the other hand, it became silent in cases of accusations directed against the United States or Russia. So the United States have been accused of committing international crimes in Afghanistan, and Russia is now being accused of committing international crimes in Ukraine. And in these two cases, we have no action, no decision taken by the Security Council. So when previous speakers focused, especially Professor Cassius Chai, when he said about this reform of UN system, this reform is about the problem of veto power. But is it possible to liquidate it? Of course, we know that it is not possible to adopt a new provision. It is not possible to revise UN Charter without votes of permanent members. So of course we may adopt such a change, such a revision by votes, by the majority of votes in the General Assembly, but we still need to wait for ratifications or any other form of acceptance. And in the second phase, we need to have votes from all permanent members. And of course, Great Britain, France, they say that they are ready to resign, but it's unlikely to see China or Russia or US ratifying such a revision. So I always say that it would be easier to liquidate UN and create a totally new organization than to reform the UN. Although this scenario is not quite optimistic, because probably superpowers would become outside of this new organization. So maybe it is better to have UN, even if it's so weak. And this third element, so accusations directed at ICC, accusations of being responsible for regionalization of justice, it's because mostly African cases are being examined by the tribunal, and that's why the court is treated sometimes as kind of a neo-colonial instrument in Western hands. We may hear such arguments. So actually, and these will be my concluding remarks. In today's world, in contemporary international relations, the position of states towards the concept of individual accountability for international crimes, first of all, it is shaped, as always, by the current situation in international arena. It is shaped by particular interests of states, and of course obligations which are a result of some kind of alliances of multilateral or bilateral character. And as a result, the concept of individual responsibility, in my opinion, and it will be unfortunately a pessimistic conclusion, this concept of accountability loses its normative character, because we always focus on situations when someone disagrees with decisions, for instance, of ICC. So in my opinion, the position of states towards individual responsibility, towards the International Criminal Court activities can be described by using three words: disagreement, refusal, and obstinacy. And in case of evidence, I think that they are quite obvious. First of all, immunity agreements, for instance, those negotiated by US in order to guarantee immunities for American citizens, mostly soldiers. Secondly, these are cases of withdrawal from the Rome Statute in kind of a protest, but also in attempt to avoid accusations against own nationals. And finally, the third evidence, sanctions imposed on ICC. Donald Trump during his first term, and now starting his second term, he made two decisions imposing sanctions on ICC. And in my opinion, this is this visible proof that states disagree, states refuse, and that states are stubborn, doesn't want and that they don't want to follow international justice goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Anna Potyrała from Adam Mickiewicz University, for your brilliant speech. It was very, very exciting, inspiring presentation speech. So any questions for audience? If I may, because you mentioned about the accusation of, you mentioned about the legal position of Putin and Netanyahu, and accusation of ICC for politicization, yeah? But maybe this is a question about effectiveness of ICC and all this system of responsible for crime on the international level, but also a question about the effectiveness of United Nations system and security councils. Yeah, what is your opinion? Yeah, and do you believe that some reform of this system is possible in contemporary world, or rather not? Because so we can say also about the crisis of this system, yeah? And because we are in the middle of the rebuilding of the new global order, yeah?
As I mentioned before, I think that from the formal point of view, from the legal point of view, there is no chance for the revision of the UN Charter because of these mechanisms of introducing revisions. So as I said, okay, we may have a 2/3 majority in the General Assembly, any votes count. All votes are equal in the General Assembly. But if we would like these revisions, these amendments to become binding, then we need to have ratifications from, again, a 2/3 majority, but within this majority, we need to have votes from 5 permanent members, and that's impossible to be achieved. So actually, any reform, doesn't matter if we think about the liquidation of veto right, or if we think, for instance, about making the Security Council bigger by adding some new permanent members. We also have a proposal to liquidate the permanent seat or permanent seats in the Security Council. But all these proposals, they need to be proceeded in a way which is written down in the UN Charter. I think that from this point of view, we haven't witnessed the change of the text of the UN Charter when the Soviet Union disappeared. From Ukrainian president during the Security Council meeting, seeking an argument why we should not take the Russian veto into account, he used this argument: Russia is taking this seat illegally because in the text, the binding text of an international multilateral treaty, which is the UN Charter, we have the Soviet Union still visible, not the Russian Federation, because we didn't go through this process of amendments. And of course, no reactions on that argument occurred, but from the legal point of view, yes, that's the reason why the UN cannot be reformed, or any reform is unlikely. And if we focus on this international criminal law system and this regime of individual accountability, well, for sure, the ICC is not, the International Criminal Court is not an ideal instrument, but accusing the court of politicization because of certain persons to be indicted, it is a total misunderstanding on the concept of individual accountability. Equality is crucial. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what you are. If you are accused of committing the grave violations of international law, then you must face justice. This is what Nuremberg principles are about. And in case of this regionalization, we must remember that in many cases, African countries formally transferred cases to ICC, asking ICC to act, to gather evidence, to prepare indictments, and to start proceedings. And finally, if I'm optimistic in case of, for instance, Putin or Netanyahu, of course not, I'm not, because again, it is unlikely to start trials against those persons. If they are not in The Hague, it's impossible to start proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you once again for excellent speech. Thank you very much. It was very interesting. And now it's time for speech by Professor Oscar Pérez de la Fuente from Carlos III University in Madrid, Spain, Associate Professor of Philosophy and Law and Political Philosophy on this university, accredited as full professor, and what is also very important, the former chair of RC26, and now I'm very happy because Oscar is still a member of RC26 board, and his topic is disinformation. Yeah, during Never Again is Now, and from disinformation and human rights. Exactly. Yeah, and maybe one more sentence, because I would like to thanks to Oscar for help during the preparing this event meeting, and thanks to Oscar we have this platform. It seems that this is a safe platform for such meeting. Thank you very much, Oscar, for your help on this field and other fields also. Thank you very much. And last, because so I'm very proud. Oscar is also co-editor and author of many publications. Lately, he published a new book, but we cooperate together, and during the last 2-3 years, we published 3 books in Palgrave publisher and also in Routledge. So I'm very, very happy for this cooperation. Thank you very much, Oscar, also for this. Okay, Oscar, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I'm very happy to be here today with friends and colleagues, with my friend and colleague JJ. We are organizing several activities, and it's our tradition to organize this Human Rights Day. I think it's the 5th edition of the Human Rights Day in RC26. Also with Che, with Anju, with Alex, with all Manuelito, all the members of RC26. Okay, well, I would like to explain what I'm going to talk about today. I am going to talk about my new book. My new book is about disinformation and epistemic virtues. And I think it's related with the question of the never again, because we need informed populations in order to take decisions. And I think it has a relationship with different topics that are current affairs and are very, very interesting. First, we begin with the alternative facts, where was the inauguration of the President Donald Trump in 2017. There were a few people listening, starting with the inauguration of Barack Obama, and the journalist asked to the team, to the Trump team, what was the difference? They say, no, there are more people in Trump inauguration than in Obama. And this began the theory of the alternative facts. We can think that President Trump has positioned himself as a leading expert in spreading the well-known alternative facts or post-truth. And my approach is that we need a turn to promote turn towards the agents when addressing issues of disinformation, fake news, and post-truth. And this is based in virtue epistemology in a responsibilities variance. This means that this change consists in focusing on the epistemic virtues of the creators, disseminators, and receivers of disinformation and fake news. Usually, truth, knowledge, and ignorance are concepts studied by philosophy and epistemology. However, usually are not linked with journalism, are not linked with fake news. My research connects epistemology, the reflections of knowledge, of truth, of ignorance, with journalism ethics. And this is something new. This is a new approach to disinformation. We are in a great disorientation, and explained by affective or emotional turn, a technological or digital turn, and the linguistic or pragmatic turn. It takes a lot of time to talk about all these terms, but basically the thing is that a skeptical or relativistic approach is majoritarian in certain circles. This means there are no moral truth, there is no possible knowledge, there is no possibility to search the truth. Truth is a universal concept, and it's very difficult to find truth. And then we are in an epoch, in a stage of post-truth. Okay, some clarifications. Misinformation is characterized as false, inaccurate information, but not generated with the intention to cause harm. Disinformation is defined as false and fabricated information aimed at harming individuals, social group, entity, or nation. And malinformation is defined as information based on reality used to cause harm to an individual, entity, or country. Fake news are politically connotated. For example, for Donald Trump, CNN and New York Times are fake news. This means that those who don't think like him are considered fake news for Donald Trump. There is an author that say, stop talking about fake news, because fake news is related to propaganda. However, fake news is useful as synonymous of disinformation. The Code of Good Practice on Disinformation of the European Commission define in a definition that has great consensus, disinformation as misleading or verifiable false content generates economic benefit or produced with the intention to deceive that can cause public harm. Okay, this is the informative part. What is disinformation? Second part, the archetype turn. What is the ethics of virtue? Well, in ethics, we have the deontological approach, the consequentialist approach, and the ethics of virtue approach. The ethics of virtue supports the idea that an action is right if is what a virtuous agent would characteristically do. Then a virtue is understood as the dispositions related to practice associated to models of excellence that are internal goods to certain practice. Then in certain practice, there are some habits and some dispositions that produce excellence, and these are virtues, and the contrary are the vices. For example, this ethics of virtue is agent-centered than act-centered, is concerned more with being than doing, and addressing the question, what kind of person should I be, rather the question, what kind of action should I do? Okay, what about epistemology? The archetype turn in epistemology. There are two approaches, fiabilist and responsibilist. Fiabilist approach is based on competencies, faculties or natural powers of national capabilities, such as memory, introspection, sensory perception, and reason. This is not interesting for disinformation. However, we have this responsibility approach in which we have motivational traits aimed to inquiry, such as impartiality, open-mindedness, intellectual alternativeness, thoroughness, tenacity, intellectual courage. These are traits of character that makes more possible to connect with epistemic goods. What are these epistemic virtues? Sincerity, truthfulness, objectivity, truth, Aristotelian fraudness, epistemic diligence, accuracy, meticulousness, precision, inquisitiveness, intellectual curiosity, open-mindedness, intellectual humility, courage, honesty, integrity, intellectual integrity. For example, truthless, morally directly involved in achieving or persevering in affirmation of truth. Objectivity requires being truthful, impartial, fair, and balanced. Prudence is related with epistemic diligence, who involve an active, responsible commitment to seeking justified beliefs, avoiding negligence and carelessness. Intellectual courage involves persisting in the pursuit of truth despite pressures and personal well-being. Open-mindedness and intellectual humility allow questioning one's beliefs and considering alternative perspectives, vital for combating misinformation and polarization. Okay, what's the opposite? The epistemology of biases. What are biases? Intellectual biases, dogmatism, closed-mindedness, intellectual arrogance, credulity, insensitivity, shyness, unservibility, apathy, distrust, negligence and carelessness, stubbornness, laziness or idleness, lack or excess of curiosity, cowardice, conformism, neglect, rigidity, prejudice, illusions, insensitivity to detail, lack of rigor, epistemic malevolence, etc. Okay, 2 practical cases and conclusions. Brexit. Let's apply this epistemology of virtue to 2 practical cases of disinformation. In this case, negligence and manipulation are identified in economic and security issues, and dogmatism and closed-mindedness are amplified by digital echo chambers, hindering intellectual openness and promoting polarization. In the case of the Brexit, there was a fake news in which the National Health Service, well, each week that United Kingdom remained in European Union cost United Kingdom 350 million pounds per week. And this money should be in the National Health Service. This is a fake news, and this was refuted by the members of the Leave the European Union campaign. There is another kind of fake news in which, in a survey in citizens of the United Kingdom, only 29% of respondents correctly stated that immigrants pay more in taxes than they receive in benefits of the social service. This means that the dogmatism and intellectual arrogance says that the great majority of people in United Kingdom thinks that migrants receive more benefits than pay taxes. And this is an echo chamber or a filter bubble. This means there is an epistemic bias in order to this result, in order to achieve this result in this survey. Okay, the Catalan independentist referendum in 2017. There are some legal confusions as form of disinformation regarding the scope of the right to self-determination and the concept of the right to decide and their applicability linked to epistemic biases as lack of vigor, dogmatism, and intellectual arrogance. For example, the British Parliament established that there was a Russian interference in the Spanish referendum in October 2017, and Russia has interest to provoke this conflict during in the Spanish population, and this has been proven. Sorry. For example, these Russian-oriented media spread ideas such as the European Union will recognize Catalonia independence following the accession process, comparison between Spain and Ukraine with Catalonia in the verge of the civil war, similar to the Donbass. Referendum in Catalonia is similar to the Crimea referendum. These are fake news. These are false informations. that are used intentionally to cause harm. And there is a kind of disinformation about the right to external self-determination. This is related with human rights. This means that the current interpretation in international law is that the external self-determination is only for the classical decolonization. This means the overseas colonies, or when there is an unjust military occupation, or in the case of the apartheid in South Africa, when a racial group has been denied significantly access to participation in government. Of course, this is not the case in Catalonia, and they invented this term, right to decide, and this right to decide, it is defined as a demos, a community whose subversion of majority rule is applied to collective decisions, must be able to decide about anything without entry restrictions or pre-existing conditions. This means a majority, a demos, could decide about anything. And this is the right to decide. And this could seem very nice, however, is against the law. It's against some concepts of the law. For example, the differentiation between sovereignty and autonomy. This right to decide about everything is typical of sovereignty, and the state is sovereign, and the subunits are autonomous, but a subunit cannot be sovereign, only exercising a right to decide, because it's not a legal right, it's an aspiration to have a right. Well, conclusions. This agent-centered approach towards creators and disseminators should lead as a guide to questioning context of disinformation, where information aligns more closely with epistemic virtues such as sincerity, objectivity, truthfulness, prudence, epistemic diligence, accuracy, meticulousness, precision, intellectual curiosity, open-mindedness, intellectual humility, intellectual courage, and intellectual honesty. And on the other hand, when misinformation and fake news is identified, it can be considered as a product of epistemic vices such as prejudice, illusions, epistemic malevolence, carelessness, neglect, negligence, insensibility to detail, lack of rigor, dogmatism, closed-mindedness, intellectual arrogance, servility, conformity, and cowardice. My defense of the virtues is because they are again a skepticism. The most important thing is implicit. We use virtues because virtues are against relativism, and virtues affirms epistemic goods, that epistemic goods exist. A second idea is that virtues are related with character of human beings, and virtues advices describe very well how human beings are. And this is very important nowadays, because nowadays we have the artificial intelligence, and decisions, some people think that should be taken by algorithms, and algorithms has no character, has no virtues, has no vices. Algorithm has their own rules. And I think virtues approach is important to distinguish human beings from artificial intelligence and from algorithms. And virtue epistemology is good because it reminds us that we all are human beings with with our virtues and our vices. Finally, it is advisable to promote and discuss attitudes and character traits that bring epistemic goods closer to human beings and to avoid those that distance them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Oscar, for a brilliant speech. Thank you very much. It was very interesting. Okay, for our session is last very long, and so. If I may, because I have also the presentation, So, and maybe my presentation, it will be a little bit close to the Oscar topic, because I would like to present the topic about hate speech. Okay, let's share this.
I think Matthew wants to say something.
Could you help me? Oh, okay.
Matthew, we don't listen you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
I believe it's good afternoon to some. It's evening here. Good evening. Thank you for the presentation. Actually, I'm very much grateful for this opportunity to discuss these frontiers on human rights. I do have a quick question on Oscar, for Professor Oscar, if I may. Regarding the idea on sovereignty and autonomy, I find it I'm fascinated by this the tension between these two concepts, particularly in the case for democracies, given the fact that in democracies there will be minority groups. So in contrast to the idea of having right to decide, which can be related to majority rule, no? Majority rule. I'm curious on how we can compromise, if not compromise, or create, address, or find a solution on minority groups trying to express their concerns of not being able to effectively participate in a democratic state. How can we? What could be the possible ways to address this?
Yeah, I can answer, no? Okay, yeah, it's very interesting. It's an open question. The point is that there is a distinction between external and internal self-determination.
Yes.
And there is a distinction between sovereignty and autonomy. What does mean? That what a minority group, like a national minority cannot do in usual terms is the decision to leave the country. However, the decision to self-government, autonomy, self-government, is internal self-determination, and it's, of course, is promoted, is considered. The only discussion is considered that any group has the right to leave the country, to relive the state, to create a new state. And this is the right to decide. And I think this is not a legal right. Could be an aspiration, but it's not a legal right. That's my point.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Matthew for your question. Maybe someone else would like to share your opinion, comments, or a question. If not, so let's jump to the my topic. Okay, yeah. So I would like to analyze this last 80 years from the fighting hate speech perspective. And okay, yes, this is a sentence from the interview with Lily Ebert, a Hungarian-born Holocaust survivor deported to Auschwitz in 1945. Unfortunately, Lily Ebert died in 2024, last year, but she said such sentence to underscore that at the beginning of this way to the Holocaust, it was the hate speech. Yeah? So sometimes someone now try to compare this years to the 30s of 20th century. So, for example, one of the reasons why this is interesting attempts, this is so the level of hate speech. Okay, so. Yeah, the Second World War remains the paradigms of destruction caused by hate speech and hate propaganda. Yeah, over the past 8 decades, the fight against hate speech has evolved, of course, and tried to adapt to changes in communication technologies, social structures, and human rights. Yeah, and we can in my opinion, we can find the 5 periods in so the first between 1945 to 1960, so the first post-war period, the era of expanded international law since 1960 to 1985. Next, the period human rights consolidation till 2005, the era of social media 2005 to 2020, and the digital regulation. This is last 5 years. Yeah. Okay. So, but let's start from definition of hate speech. In fact, there is no single universal accepted definition of this term in international law, but a number of international organizations have developed their own approach, using combining the element of speech with reference to protected characteristic on the risk of discrimination, hostility, or violence. So I would like to underscore, for example, this attempts to the hate speech definition proposed by in the United Nations Strategy and Plan of Action on Hate Speech. And here, hate speech is defined as a form of communication that attacks or uses pejorative or discriminatory language against a person or group of persons because of their identity, including religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, and gender. Of course, we have other attempts, for example, in Council of Europe documents. So in recommendation number of 97, hate speech, this is all form of expression that disseminate, incite, promote, or justify racial hatred, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, or other form of hatred based on intolerance, including aggressive nationalism or ethnocentrism. So the European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance, Council of Europe, defines that this is use of certain form of expression, in particular incitement, promotion, or instigation of concept, hatred of vilification of persons or groups on grounds such as race, religion, national, gender, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. Yeah? So once again, this periods, and let's start from this years 1945, 1960, and during this period, after the end of the World War II, the international community made effort to establish institutions aimed at preventing the return of ideologies of hatred. The Charter of United Nations from 1945 included a commitment to promote human rights without discrimination. But I would like to underscore the role of Universal Declaration of Human Rights from 1948, reinforced this principle by establishing universal standards of human dignity. Yeah? Please remember about also Professor Anna Petrova mentioned the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide from 1948. Next period, 1960-1985, we can call the era of expanded international law, and during this year, for example, we can find International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discriminations. So from 1965, and also International Human Rights Covenants, of course, from 1966. Next year we'll celebrate the anniversary, 60th anniversary of this covenant. And please remember about Article 20 of ICSPR, which obliged states to prohibit any propaganda for war and any propaganda for racial, religious, and any other form of intolerance. This article became the focus of discussion on the balance. It is also important, balance between freedom of expression and protection against hate speech. And on the European level, we can underscore the European Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms from 1950. And of course, some protocols to this convention paved the way for European countries to incorporate protection against hate speech, among others of values, of course, into national law without completely banning freedom of expression. Also, it is very important, the role of European Court of Human Rights, because the European Court began to develop a doctrine allowing restriction of freedom of expression in a case where speech poses a direct threat to others' rights. Okay, the period between 1985 2005. So this is a kind of consolidation of the human rights, and so here we have, for example, the United Nations Strategy and Plan of Action on Hate Speech from 2019. So it was idea of Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Of course, all United Nations by Antonio Guterres launched this strategy. This strategy makes a firm commitment to step up coordinated action to tackle hate speech, both on global and national levels. Yeah. So it is also worthy to mention recommendation 97/20 of the Committee of Ministers to Member States on hate speech. This document recommends that member states take a comprehensive approach to combating this phenomena, including prohibiting statements by public authorities that could be interpreted as hate speech, with an obligation to publicly condemn them, creating a legal framework, civil, criminal, and administrative, enabling prosecution, with emphasis on prosecutorial policy and sanction, such as community service, protecting freedom of expression, Article 10 of European Convention on Human Rights, but with the possibility of restriction for particularly offensive forms that destroy the right of others. The recommendation emphasizes the responsibility of the media, and this is also very important, not to amplify hate speech while respecting their editorial autonomy and calls for education and monitoring. Okay, of course, I should also mention about the role of international law and international criminal courts and also European human courts on this field and achievement. But I'm afraid that we don't have enough time. So maybe in very shortly about the EU legislation. It is also important to mention Council Directive 2043, Anti-Discrimination Directive, which oblige member states to prohibit hate speech based on the race and ethnic origin. We can say only on these two features, but okay, this is one of the achievement of this regulation. And framework decision 2008 913, which harmonizes member state approaches to combating hate speech. In Article 1, EU required the prohibition of public incitement of discrimination, hostility and violence against the group of persons of member of group on grounds on race, color, descent, religion, ethnic origins. Yeah? Okay. Next period, 2005-2020, we can say that this is era of social media. Of course, we can say that next period, this is also the social media era, but okay, it was started in my opinion 2005. So digitalization and new challenges, because the development of the internet and social media platform like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube introduced new challenges for traditional regulatory frameworks. Hate speech, once limited to mainstream media, could now be disseminated massively and anonymously by individuals. So when we analyze a regulatory response, we should mention a resolution of the United Nations Subcommission on the Protection of Minorities. Resolution, for example, defines hate speech as any form of oral, written, or action-based communication that include incitement to discrimination, hostility, or violence against a person or group of persons based on specific characteristic, race, ethnic origins, religions, disability, sexual orientation, and danger. Yeah. So also very important role plays General Policy Recommendation number 15 from 2015 as a key document from the European Commission against racism and intolerance in Council of Europe, which provides guidelines for Council of Europe member states for combating hate speech. This is, in my opinion, very important documents. So next, we also mention many cases in European Court of Human Rights. For example, in the case of Holocaust denial, this is Gironde versus France, or anti-LGBT speech in such cases like, for example, Weideland versus Sweden, on Polish case, Bednarek versus others, and Poland from 2025. Yeah. Okay. So I would like also to underscore the role of Council Directive 2043, Anti-Discrimination Directive, and I mentioned about, also a framework decision from 2018. But also it is also interesting how some countries in Europe, like Germany, France, try to combat against hate speech. For example, in Germany, Network Act of 2017, or in France, the Act of Combating the Dissemination of the Terrorist Material and Pedophile Content, also from this year. It is also, I must admit that some online platforms, social media platforms, tried to establish some internal moderation and appeal system. For example, Facebook established an independent oversight board in 2020, but after the last election in US, they tried to change this system. Okay, and the last 5 years, so we can say that this is some attempts to regulation of in the digital era. So I would like to underscore such documents like Council of Europe Recommendation 2022-16, or so when we think about the European Union Digital Services Act from 2025. Yeah, I think that in the paper version of my presentation, I will try to present all details of these documents. Yeah. Also, please remember about the United Nations International Guidelines from 2020, and the problem with find the solution between two values: freedom of expression and protection from hate speech. Yeah. Okay. The Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorists. This is also one of the international research initiatives, and education and training counter narratives. This is some of the important suggestion and recommendation. Yeah. Okay. We must also remember about European Media Freedom Act from 2024, and Oscar mentioned about the European Union Code of Practice on Disinformation. Yeah? Okay, maybe this is two attempts to this problem in German and in the Scandinavian countries. But I would like to summarize this part of my presentation, that when we think about and we try to compare all legal system, we can say that protecting against hate speech include at least such values like race and ethnicity, religion and non-religion, national origin. But in recent years, in most European countries and also in Canada, in those countries, extended protection to such features, such values like age, disability, gender identity, or gender expression, or sexual orientation also. But unfortunately, this is not a very optimistic case from Poland, because in Polish criminal code, in Article 256 and 257, we have protection against the promotion of the, for example, hate speech, insult solely on the grounds of nationality, ethics, origin, race, religion, or lack of religion. But in this year, we had an amendment from March 2025, and this amendment extends this list to include disability, age, gender, and sexual orientation. But so Polish president, former Polish president, President Duda, but I think that current president has the same opinion, unfortunately. But he sent a preventive review to the Polish Constitutional Court, and so because according to the Polish president point of view, this new regulation, anti-discrimination regulation based on age, gender, sexual orientation, disability, violates some Polish constitutional rules, like principle of rule of law, principle of certain of criminal liability, and freedom of expression in connection with the limitation clause of the Constitution. And unfortunately, Polish Tribunal, or we can say so-called Constitutional Tribunal, this is maybe the topic for another lectures, in the September decision, held that the new regulation, the amendment to the Polish Penal Code, this is again the Polish Constitution, according to the Tribunal Court, Constitutional Tribunal. So the significant extension of the scope of criminalization of acts that were previously not punishable, and here, according to the Constitutional Tribunal, we have intensification of liability by reclassifying some behaviors as aggravated offense, a general increase in the punitiveness of the system in the area of freedom of expression. Yes, but okay, time for conclusion. Because as you can see, we have many regulations, many attempts to this combat with hate speech. But when we analyze hate speech index, okay, for example, I can recommend the Areto hate speech index. This is quite new instrument since 2024. But if you can see, we can observe on every level, so big change, yeah, even more than 100%. Only homophobia on this field we can observe a little bit less such post. It is also interesting hate crime report from Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe. So for 2024, and this contribution amount to 2,700 hate incidents, including more than 7,000 statistical incidents and more than 5,000 incidents. Yeah. Okay. Time for conclusions. Yeah. So when we analyze last 80 years of regulatory efforts to the hate speech, significant challenges remain. First, online anonymity. Perpetrators of hate speech can act with impunity due to the anonymity of the internet. Scaling, of course. A single negative statement can be disseminated to millions of people in seconds, and this is what I sometimes call the paradox of the social media. That this is in fact not social media, but anti-social media. Algorithmic amplification recommendation system may unintentionally amplify hate speech through user engagement. Please also remember that according to the last report during the last year, majority of posts was created not by human being but robots. Yeah. Of course, we have the problem of definition of of hate speech. One of the greatest difficulties in combating hate speech is defining exactly what constitutes hate speech, what constitutes satire, and what's constitution, such terms. Political polarization and radicalization. In recent days, hate speech has become increasingly linked to the political polarization and radicalization. Social media platforms may inadvertently reinforce polarization through algorithm and filtering. For example, my research in Poland, I can say that we can say that this is last years when we can observe the increasing of polarization. This is it is observing during the social media era. Yeah. So from reactivity to proactivity. Early efforts focus on preventing the return of Nazism. Contemporary approach, it seems, proactively investigate and prohibit hate speech before it spreads. From criminal law along to the holistic approach, this is a second conclusion. Contemporary approaches include education, meditation, counter-narrative reinforcement, and psychological support, because I think only such a holistic attempts to the combat with the hate speech could be effective. From the traditional to the digital media, regulation have shifted from a focus on press and radio speech to social media platforms and algorithmic recommendation systems. From national sovereignty to international coordination, increasingly international institutions are playing a role of coordinating responses to hate speech. From protection against brutal hate speech to protection against subtle forms. Contemporary approaches also address more subtle forms of discrimination and dehumanization. Nevertheless, despite these advances, significant challenges remain in balancing freedom of expression, effective regulation enforcement, and adaptation to a rapidly changing technological landscapes. The future of combating hate speech will likely require further international cooperation, I'm sure, innovative technologies for detecting hate speech, and the simultaneous strengthening of accountability for speech in civil society. Yeah. So thank you very much for your attention, and it is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. Okay, how to stop this? Any questions, comments? Okay.
Yeah, I have a question, JJ.
So,
very interesting presentation. My new book is about disinformation. My previous one was about hate speech, and I would like that you go deep because my thesis in the previous book was that hate speech is regulated in Spain in the criminal code. There is an article. However, the judges and the criminal doctrine is against to punish by hate speech. I would like to know the situation in Poland, because I understood that the Constitutional Court is reluctant to apply the new forms of hate speech, but what about the ordinary judges? The ordinary judges apply hate speech, uses hate speech, or they don't punish for these crimes?
Okay, thank you very much for this question. Yes, This is a very important question and topic, because in fact this is a question about how this law play no in books by inaction. Yeah. So I don't know any case when someone was sentenced for example, for prison based on this articles in last 30 years in Poland. Yeah. Okay, some people was sentenced, but for example, for fine, for example, on such kind of punishment, not for prison. Yeah, this is one point. But I would like also to underscore one more, because the regulation against hate speech in Polish penal code is, as I mentioned, limited. Yeah, because for example, last amendment from 2025 tried to cover also discrimination based on or against the homosexual persons. Yeah. And unfortunately, according to decision Polish president and vetoes, and he sent this regulation, this amendment to the Tribunal Court, which is a very also now. So this is a problematic institution. Alex mentioned about the constitutional crisis. We can say that we are in the middle of the crisis, of the constitutional crisis in Poland. One of the evident, this is a situation with the Polish Constitutional Court, yeah, Tribunal. Yeah, so sometimes we call the Polish Tribunal, Constitutional Tribunal Court as a so-called Polish, so-called Constitutional Court. Yeah, this is the problem. So the decision, okay, the court made this decision in September, but the government didn't publish this decision. This is a next problem. Yeah. Okay, but yeah. Once again, answering on your question, yeah. The law in action, even in such a limited version, this is, we can say, not very serious. Yeah. So because, of course, it is, there were sentence or a court decision in the case of this, not many, but it was. But not for such sentence like prison. Yeah, this is maybe also so we can say that the courts try to find this golden solution between freedom of expression and hate speech. Yeah, because this is I think that the big challenge, how to find this best solution, how to find, because of course this is partially true what President of Poland wrote in this his veto, that this is a threat for freedom of expression, but we must remember that in Europe, and I tried to show that during the last 80 years, the freedom of speech is not absolute. This is, we have some exception. Yeah, this is not absolute values. Yeah, freedom of expression. So my freedom is the border of my freedom is point where is your freedom. Yeah, it's very logical and. So I think explanation of this. Yeah.
You have a question in the chat.
Okay. Let's check. Tirupati, yeah? No, okay, I can see, yeah. Dear RC26 family, thank you for important Human Rights Day. Even I have a brief question. How can regional human rights issues be addressed when the state either restricts or denies basic rights? For example, how do women and marginalized communities assert their rights when violations occur at home, reinforced by religion-based restriction or shaped by social hierarchies? In such context, is include human rights protection possible without a supportive state structure? Yeah, thank you very much, because this is a very important case in Poland, because I mentioned about the problems or crisis of some constitutional institution like courts or tribunal courts, etc. And we are, I think, in my opinion, we are lucky because we are a member of Council of Europe and European Union. And according to we can say that for example, the system of protection of human rights also on the level of Council of Europe and European Union, this is very important. This is a big support for such person and such groups of people. Yeah, and I think that because please remember how European Convention on Human Rights works. Yeah, and so we can accuse a state to the European Court of Human Rights in the case of violation of European Convention on Human Rights. Yeah, the second level is courts of European Union. Yeah, so I think that such regional system, if such system is effective, yeah. Okay, we have also some problems with the effectiveness of for example, and for especially during the law and justice period, because according to the law and justice, okay, on the first place is the Polish Constitution, and then on the second place is, for example, European Convention on Human Rights or EU tractates. Yeah, so this is a problem, but I think that generally we can say so that okay, we are happy that we have such European system of protection on human rights, not only on the sphere of declaration, but also we can say that this is a law in action. Yeah. I don't know, maybe Oscar, this is a question also to you. Yeah.
Well, okay, the regional system can have, but also there are the national system of human rights. There is an ombudsman. There are some commissions of human rights. If the system is developed, if it is not developed, it is a real problem. But in some countries, there is an ombudsman who is a commissioner in charge of the protection of human rights. Also, there are commissions of human rights or commissions of equality and non-discrimination. And also, there are non-state actors, such as International Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, that can denounce the situation. And also, it's possible to make a complaint to the Universal System of Human Rights, to the Human Rights Committee, if there is a breach of the rights of the Civil and Political Rights Covenant. That next year, Human Rights Day, I think we will dedicate to the anniversary of the covenants of the civil and political rights and the economic and social and political rights. Okay, there are some possibilities. The situation is that there is no state support to the human rights policy. It's more difficult, but the strength of human rights is that you can denounce, you can fight, you can struggle. If the situation is not good, you can struggle against this situation, and you have some basis. And human rights are the critical morality of mankind, of humanity. That you can criticize governments of everywhere with human rights. You can criticize governments of any part of the world from human rights. Well, it's my view. I don't know. It's an impression.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Oscar, for your answer. And I think that maybe it will be a good conclusion of our all debate, because this is almost 3 hours of our meeting. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry that it lasts so long. But this is the reason why I ask every speaker about the idea of reconstruction of United Nations system, human rights system, because in my opinion, and I think that hate speech is a good examples and evidence that we have many regulations, yeah, on the human rights area, but the problem of international level, international law, this is a problem of law in action. We have law in book, but we must do everything that in the case of human rights, it will be also law in action, yeah? So this is, I think, the problem and big challenge. Okay, Matthew, you have a question, yeah? Or comments?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Actually, it's more of a comment also regarding the discussion on regional human rights issues from Tirupati. I mean, I can also share in the case of the Philippines, specifically in regards to the development of anti-discrimination ordinances that protect sexual and gender minorities. What happens in the Philippines is that there is no national state level protection against sexual and gender minorities, including the LGBTQIA+ community. However, despite having that absence of a national state structure, at the local level, the more even at the more grassroots level, you would have local government units enacting their own ordinances to protect sexual and gender minorities. And this is highlighted with the support of civil society organizations. And I with that kind of example, I think the ability to mobilize, as also shared by Professor Oscar, is really important, that in order to pursue meaningful human rights protection, even outside supportive state structures or closed political opportunity structures, there is still opportunity with civil society organizations, with sympathetic local government champions, local government units. I think there is still an opening there. And aside from that, actually, I also wanted, if I may just quickly bring it up, in terms of meaningful human rights protection, I think I recently heard, and I'm not sure if Professor JJ will be able to share more about this, but I recently heard a case in regarding the Court of Justice in the European Union expressing a decision that members of the EU must recognize and recognize the same-sex unions that or marriages that were conducted in member states that approve of this practice. even outside, other member states who do not legalize such marriage. I think that kind of instance where a more supranational organization is able to affirm the recognition of and also to respect the legal rights of different EU members, and to recognize that in other member states is also a way to show that there are areas, there are opportunities to pursue meaningful human rights protection even outside support without a supportive state structure. Yes, so I just wanted to add that comment to that question. And if I may, I just wanted to also express my agreement. Yes, Professor Anna. Decided only about the obligation to recognize. Yes, that's right. The recognition, that is correct.
First, to Patty and to Matthew. So thank you very much, Anna, for your voice. Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
Well,
okay.
If I may, in 1 minute, it has been a wonderful session. Thank you very much, JJ. It was very interesting. All the intervention was very interesting. It's our 5th time in the Human Rights Day, and I hope it will be more.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, and I am happy to be here today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Oscar, for your help, for attending this session. Also to all speakers, discussants, etc. So on the end, never again is now. I'm afraid that this sentence is very important those days, and I hope that it will be a great lesson from past how to fight with big challenges for humanity, for global society, and for different groups of people several times marginalized in many different parts of the world. So once again, thank you very much to RC26 family for attending this session, for your voice, and I hope that we will meet very, very soon. And I hope also, because Oscar, please remember about our idea of the book. So Never Again is Now. Maybe some also for our people from audience who comment also would like to join this project, and I hope it will be finally published quite soon. Yeah. So thank you very much, and see you soon in other of our RC26 activities. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Have a blessed day or evening.
Once more, I have the certificate for all participants. I will maybe next week scan and will send you by mail. Okay.
Thank you.
And